Today, we're going to talk about the exploration of Vinland, specifically in the Saga of the Greenlanders. I am Ulla Brenna's daughter, self-professed Norse nerd. I'm joined by my lovely co-hosts. You will introduce yourselves.
I'm Bercy Edvarderson, and I think Latin has too many cases. And that's how you know that I'm an Old Norse scholar.
Nice.
And I am Keneva the library, and I agree with Bercy that Latin has too many cases. Why do we need a vocative case?
Vocative makes no sense. Ablative,
I totally agree.
Ablative, you're on thin ice, but you can stay.
So two things. One, vocative, yes, I completely agree, it's dumb. I guess three things. Two, having this like vestigial locative case is stupid. Like, just let it go, guys. Let it go. Just let it be. Into the void. Anyway, so that's dumb. And then ablative, right? Like, here's my one cranky about ablative is you have in Star Trek you have ablative armor, and I was so mad that the ablative armor of Star Trek had nothing to do with the ablative case. I was just like, this is bullshit.
Oh my God.
To get through the ablative armor, you should have to explain when you use the ablative case and with which prepositions.
Okay,
and why it's anywhere different from dative or accusative. Why we can't just use those two.
Right.
Anyway, I knew exactly what to push Kinnahill's button.
Right? Okay, let's roll this back a little bit. We are not talking language, Latin. We're not talking about the cases in Latin and the declensions and all that happy crap. We are, in fact, talking about the Greenland Saga. So, Kenhill, do you want to go into your dating notes?
Yeah, so before we get into the body of the saga itself, it's kind of useful to put this in its place in history. And there's actually some really interesting debates about when it was written and when it was written in comparison with a very, very similar saga, Eric's Saga Rauther, which I'm going to, after this, call Eric's Saga because my pronunciation is very English accented, Old English accented. So the argument is that definitely both sagas were written before about 1302 to 1310. For sure, Eric's Saga is older than that range, and Greenlendinga Saga is older than 1387. So we know that for sure, but then we know it probably happened after the events that it described, which are taking place around 970 to 1030. So that's the window that we know things were written in. Before the 1950s, the accepted knowledge was that Eric's Saga was written first, and then Greenland Saga kind of copies it. But starting in the 1950s, scholars really started to debate this and said, look, the oral traditions underpinning Greenland Saga are really old-fashioned, comparatively, right? Like it's more stilted, it's a little bit older in style. So the theory then became, well, maybe Greenland Saga is the older of the two. And then there's some debate about, did Greenland Saga, was that the source for Eric's Saga? But more recently, the thought is that there is a third piece that did not survive to us, that provided the source for both sagas, and the argument that's made in Helgi Thorlaksson's The Vinland Sagas in a Contemporary Light is that both sagas are derived from a no longer extant vita about this bishop Bjorn Gilson, who was sort of theoretically going to be a saint, but he never got there. So they were pushing it, right? Like it's in medieval Christianity, it was very important to have local saints. You needed those. So you wrote these vitas about, vita meaning life, going back to that Latin we were complaining about at the beginning. So a vita is the sort of proof of saintliness. It's the life of somebody, extolling their good works, extolling all the virtues about them that make them worthy of sainthood. Because at this point, you could theoretically still make somebody a saint by popular acclamation. Like if everybody agreed, this is how, by the way, we ended up with Saint Guinefort, who is one of my personal saints, because Saint Guinefort was a very good boy. He was a very good greyhound. and who deserves many treats, including sainthood, because all good dogs are saints, let's be honest.
I did not know about that. Oh my God, I have got to look more into that.
Yeah, so, okay, really quick aside then. Saint Gwynefort was the name of the saint that we named our college SCA group after at UAA, because UAA is the sea wolves, so we wanted a dog, and so Saint Gwynefort. Saint Gwynefort, the story of Saint Gwynefort, it's this, I think, central France region, was that, so Gwynefort's owner had this baby son. And one day he went out hunting, and he comes back, and he had left the son under the care of this dog. Okay, whatever.
Being as a parent, it happens. It's fine.
You know, right? It's fair. So he comes back, and the baby's room is covered in blood. The dog is covered in blood, and he's like, the dog killed my baby. And he hauls the dog out and kills the dog. And he comes back to the room, and he hears the baby cry, which you gotta, like, personally, I gotta wonder, having babysat any number of small children, like, those things don't stop. I don't know how he didn't hear the cry before, but whatever. So he hears the cry, he upends the baby's cradle, and underneath it, here is his baby safe and whole, and 2 snakes that have been slaughtered by the dog. And so he realizes his error, and he's like, oh, I'm so sad. And he builds a tomb, and then everybody starts worshiping at the tomb because this dog is so good, and they leave it treats, as all people should do for all good dogs. And then, you know, eventually Gwynefort the dog becomes Saint Gwynefort, and is actually part of a tradition of dog-headed saints. Like, there's this whole iconographic tradition of, especially Saint Christopher, with a dog head. It's very, medieval Christianity is real weird, guys. It's fun. It is not as not pagan as they want you to believe.
Yeah,
Totally true.
Like, anyway, so that's not the point, though. The point is to make a saint in medieval Christianity, you needed some good vitas. And so the theory here is that they were trying to go push for sainthood for this Bishop Bjorn Gilson. And so to do that, they wrote vitas, and the vita, which does not survive to us today, was the source for both the Greenland Saga and Erik Saga Rautha. And the sort of the part of the argument for this is actually, we're going to talk about later, but it's the importance of one of the characters in both these sagas, who at least in Greenlandinga Saga, she appears out of nowhere. She just like arrives as this guy's wife, and then suddenly she's important. And the theory here is that because she was the ancestrix of the bishop, that's why she's got such an important role in these sagas. So that is the dating arguments, that theoretically the earliest of the 2 is Greenlandinga Saga, followed by Erik's Saga, both of them originating out of this unknown vita. So that's excellent. That's what I got.
Thank you. So we are actually we meant to do this at the very beginning, but we're going to backtrack a second. Because we are talking about the exploration of Vinland, the New World, we wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we all live on native lands. We're all invaders of some sort of another. Bercy and I are from the Ohlone lands. Kenhild, I can't remember where you said you were from.
So I currently live and work in Upper Cook Inlet Denina traditional lands, right near Iklutna, which I cannot pronounce it correctly. Iklutna, I think, maybe.
Yeah, there's a G and a K, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a language that I speak, so I'm not going to be disrespectful by trying too hard. Like,
fair enough. So, and I think it is important to acknowledge that, and that we are on native lands, and it just really ties well to this. So I'm going to go through the timeline of the events in the saga itself. There's actually a lot going on in this saga. It covers a space of several seasons, several years. We're going to start with Bjarni Herjolfsson, I can't talk yet, is blown off course and sees an unknown forested land west of Greenland. Doesn't actually land. Comes back to Greenland. Leif buys Bjarni's ship and asks his father, Eric the Red, to join the expedition. Eric didn't want to, reluctantly agrees, and then on his way to the ship, he falls off of his horse and injures himself and decides, I'm not going on this trip. So Eric was an explorer in his own right, in his own time. He's credited with settling Greenland. So he already had some miles under his belt. He did not need to follow his son over to, Versi has a...
Well, Kenhild, I'm laughing at...
Sorry, with my notes up, I can't see Kenhild's face.
Real quickly, I just want to say something. Eric the Red, right at the beginning of the story, he is in Hoxdal, and he gets ejected abruptly from Hoxdal for committing some light murder, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Meh. What's
Right.
a little murder between villagers?
I don't know. But anyway, that house in Hoxdal in Iceland, I have stood in the remnants, the outline of his house. I've been to, so you can go to Eiríksstaðir and you can visit a reconstruction of the farmhouse, which, let me tell you what, that is not a big farmhouse.
No.
It is real small. Like,
Can't believe you actually stood in the footprint.
But I stood in there.
I'm so jealous.
So jealous.
My poor dad, my poor much beloved father, who was hauled around Iceland with me and just like, okay, daughter, and I'm just like, this is really cool the whole time. I made him listen to Beowulf like twice on that road trip, because what else are you gonna do? Anyway, so he got a photo of me once I'd sort of stopped vibrating standing in that house, and I'm just like,
That's just amazing.
so anyway, that's
Lucky brat.
that's all I got there.
That's fine. That's an awesome thing, and I love that you posted that picture up on the Saga Saturday page. It's fantastic.
I'm so proud.
All right, so back to our tale. So Leif takes his ship, sails northwest from the southern tip of Greenland, and finds in order places he named Helluland, which is the modern Baffin Islands area.
Like he found them in reverse order. So when Bjarni gets lost, are we talking about Bjarni, right?
No. Bjarni.
Sorry,
no, Bjarni doesn't ever actually land.
No, but he sees all of the land and describes them. He gets lost. It's kind of hard to just like imagine without a map. But he's like, he gets lost and he goes straight down to like Newfoundland.
Yes.
So like the farthest south, if you can just imagine, even if you don't know like Eastern Canadian geography that well, you can sort of imagine like the coastline coming down, and like Greenland is up here and Iceland over here. He goes directly down over here and makes his way back around.
Yes. Bjarni got blown off course to the south and worked his way back north and then back east to Greenland. No, Leif goes the other way. He winds up going up to Helluland and then down to Markland, which is modern Labrador, and then into Vinland, which is New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia.
Can I make a quick note on the names there? So the names of those places are very descriptive. Helluland, Hela, which I just love making a note of this. Hela, which is a word often seen in my lexicon, means something different in Old Norse. It means flat stone slab.
Yes.
And so Helluland is just land of flat stone slab.
Stones. Yep.
Markland, you'll see the word mark in lots of different like place names, and that just means forest. Right. So forest land, and then Vinland means wineland. Wineland.
Yes, thank you. I actually, that's one of the things that I had noted in my readings and then didn't actually write down because,
I really wanted to quickly jump in and say one of my favorite bits of the story was when he gets, is it Bjarni? Gets back to Norway and explains all this, and they're like, but you didn't like poke around and push all the buttons. And he's like, no, I didn't get
right. Oh yeah. He
like,
saw it and he's like, hey, that's really cool, I'm going home. And everybody's like, well, why did you
Bjarni is basically like the opposite of any character in a horror movie where he did everything in a survival situation correct. They got lost for weeks. They are in uncharted territory. Everything that you should do in a survival situation like that is focus on getting home and getting
He got home.
Not stopping and sightseeing in every random place you see. So he did everything right, and he goes down in history for being the most boring explorer ever.
It's totally true.
I like that in my head, like I like to imagine him going back to the court of Norway and telling everybody this, and everyone's like, man, you're just a bad Viking, dude. Like you are real lame.
Right, you're not any good at this. Yeah, I mean, no, I totally agree.
make you a retainer of the king's court. That's fine. Go back to Iceland, do your thing. Funky
Just
white
go back
boy.
and be a farmer, because you're clearly not an explorer.
Anyway, go ahead.
I totally agree. All right. On the way back, Leif comes across a shipwreck, rescues 15 people from this shipwreck, and earns the moniker the Lucky. So we now have Leif the Lucky.
And I feel
Lucky
like the
for other.
What, right. I don't know that it's luck for him.
Yeah, no, it's lucky for other people.
I'm okay with that.
Lucky for the survivors to have been found by him.
Right. So he heads back to Greenland, goes back to his farm.
Almost everyone on that was originally rescued dies.
By the way, everybody dies that winter. Oops. Yeah. Leif's brother Thorvald uses the same ship to explore west and east from Leif's camp in Vinland. One of the things I love about that is that he asks his brother Leif, hey, can I have your encampment? Can I have your house in Vinland? And Leif's like, no, you can stay in it, but you can't keep it. And that continues on throughout Leif likes to have his vacation home in Vinland. He doesn't go.
You can stay in my Airbnb, but
right. Eventually, Thorvald is driven ashore. The ship is damaged. He has to replace the keel. He stands the keel on this point, and it is then called Keel Point, otherwise known as
Kjolnes.
Thank you. Thorvald plans to settle the area, but that is thwarted because he runs into natives. This is our first encounter with the native population. He finds 9 men under 3 hide boats, and I love that they're hide boats. They're specifically called out as what they're made of. It just makes my little geeky heart happy. The Greenlanders kill all but one of the natives. That one native gets away, and soon after, a large number of natives comes and attacks the group. Thorvald is fatally wounded in the fight, and he is buried on Keel Point.
So, do you want to go first? Okay. I was just going to make a quick note on, so the terms that, I think probably best, moving, we should just continue to call them natives, because that's what we've got in our books and things like that. And it's unclear specifically who has been encountered. The Old Norse term that gets used that is clearly derogatory is Skrælings. And that's pretty much the only term that gets used in the actual narratives. But of course, we can guess which different, and it is likely that it wasn't all just one single tribe was being encountered in
absolutely.
So the 3 most likely tribes to have been encountered by Norse people in this time are the Dorset, who this is probably the least likely. They lived in Greenland but left the northern parts they were living in northern Greenland. And I don't know Canadian geography enough. I'm looking at a map, but all those islands that come down between
the Baffin Islands.
Yeah. But they had mostly receded, and the Norse settlers came down along the southern tip of Greenland, so it was unlikely that they were really encountering them very much there, but maybe some of the southern groups. And then later on, there were also Beothuk, I believe. Beothuk and Thule. Beothuk are related to the Algonquin, and Thule are the ancestors of Inuit. Are also groups that might have been encountered. But of course, the Norse is who we're hearing this from, so we only have the Norse perspective, so we're just natives.
Right, and good point on the term Skraeling is a kind of a derogatory term, which is I didn't actually put it into my notes because I don't like it.
Yeah, no.
I get it, but it is a derogatory term.
So the one comment I wanted to make is not related to the identification of the indigenous population, but rather Thorvald. We had talked about in one of our previous shows sort of that laconic Norse humor. Like you're supposed to just be real chill in the face of terrible things and just throw it out there. And so Thorvald, he's shot and he says, "I have a wound in my armpit," says Thorvald. "An arrow flew up between the gunwale and my shield under my arm. Here it is.
Right, yeah, here's the
This
hole.
will lead to my death." And he's super chill. He's like,
I'm gonna die now.
It is interesting because in this moment, there's conversations that I've had with SCA fighters, right? Who are like, this is exactly how I got killed. Here are the 4 shots that led to my death, right? And he's doing the exact same thing. He's like, the arrow came up, here's my shield. It wasn't low enough. I wasn't blocking right. Came right.
You're totally right.
Shield and the top of the gunwale. And he landed. It was a real good shot. Like
real good shot, right in the ribs.
And I'm like, I'm listening to this conversation. I'm like, I've sat and listened to this conversation. Only obviously this guy is actually going to die. Yeah. And it's just, in the end, he's like, this will lead to my death. Yeah, good prophecy, dude. Good prophecy.
Right? I like the way your translation puts it, but I think this, it was all one sentence in mine. Where did it go? Here is the arrow, and this wound will cause my death. Just so good.
I know, I totally agree. All right, so now the saga goes back to Greenland, where Thorstein, Eric's son, so Eric the Red's son, marries Thorir's widow, Gudrid. And then they set out for Vinland together because what the hell, that's a great honeymoon. They end up at a settlement in northwest Greenland. So I lost a page. So they went to Vinland. That's right. Sorry. They headed to Vinland and ended up in one of the settlements in northwest Greenland. I'm not like they got thrown off course. They ended up
hitting up Greenland first was a very common.
Yeah,
you gotta hop your way.
Right, exactly. They just didn't actually make it out of Greenland. So and in this settlement where they stopped, Thorstein dies. He rises from the dead briefly to tell Gudrid her fate. And so that kind of ties back to all of last month with our undead.
And it's a wonderful scene. And it's one of the nice scenes. We chose all these spooky tales, but there's a ton of times where people actually, like, the undead are not harmful and in fact very helpful, and they just tell you prophecies.
And this was totally a helpful, hey, this is how your life is going to play out and it's going to be awesome.
And I thought it was really sweet too that like the scene set up where like Gudrid is being consoled by another man named Thorstein.
Yeah.
And he says like, oh, don't worry, like we'll deal with the body later, and later we'll have a feast and your family and friends can console you for your loss and everything. And in that moment when she so needed that consolation, her dead husband raises from the dead, and then not only says like, you're gonna have a good life, but I'm telling you this specifically so that you can get over me.
Right?
You're gonna marry again, you're gonna have a new husband, and your life is gonna be
life's gonna be awesome. Yeah. Go ahead.
So I don't know if this
I suspect that this one's going to run long today.
I don't know if this is in your guys' translation, but in my translation it says, now Thorstein the Black picked her up in his arms and sat down with her in his
on his lap.
And it's just like, there's this moment, like I started reading that and I'm like, oh, this is going to end poorly. Like this is going to go poorly. And then he's just like, sweet. I'm real sorry about all this. And then like the end of the chapter, Thorstein the Black fulfilled all the promises he made to Gudrid. In the spring, he sold his farm and livestock, took Gudrid and all her possessions to the ship, made the ship ready, engaged a crew, and then sailed to Eiríksfjord. All the dead were buried in the church there. So good. Like Thorstein, I was really not ready to root for Thorstein the Black. I was like, okay, I don't like this picking up a crying widow and putting her in your lap. I don't like.
Right? It sounds a little creepy, but it's all touchy-feely.
But then it's just like, I'm very sorry.
I'm really sorry. I will take you and your dead husband back to your home. I got you, boo. Like, it's really cute. Yeah.
Good guy, Thorstein.
Good guy, Thorstein the Black. Yeah. So now, as you say, Gudrid is now back to the settlement in the southern tip of Greenland. Thorfinn Karlsefni arrives in Greenland from Iceland and marries Gudrid. So I think Gudrid's on her second husband, third husband, third husband at this point.
Yeah.
That we know about, that we've heard of. Because we'll talk about her a little bit more in a bit, but we don't know her origin story. So
she just kind of appears out of nowhere. But she is described as being beautiful and being smart and kind, and she's clearly a well sought after woman, as is evident with all of her marriages. So Thorfinn and Gudrid, with Freydis, Eric's daughter, and Freydis' husband Thorvald, then lead a settlement group to Helluland and Markland. They find the keel left standing at
Keel's Point.
Yeah, Keel Point.
Kjalarnes?
Yeah, that's the one. So they've actually come in 2 boats. I believe one of them is the boat that Bjarni started the saga with. I think that Freydis has gotten the boat from Leif, who got it from Bjarni, but I'd have to go back and reread it. I did not have time to find that paragraph this morning. Anyway, so they have 2 boats worth of settlers and all their livestock and stuff. Like, they are going to go settle. One boatload heads north and the other south. They are exploring. They are finding all sorts of cool things. There's so many descriptions of all of the wood and lumber that they have found, and all of the grapevines, and all of the lushness, for lack of a better word, right? At one point, they find a beached whale on the beach. Obviously on the beach, because it's a beach whale. So, being from Oregon, this just amuses me greatly, because I don't know if you guys may not realize this, but back in 1970, mid to late 70s, a whale washed up on the beach in Oregon, Cannon Beach area, I believe, and the states, it was like Department of Transportation. Yeah, Department of Transportation and Fish and Wildlife and like all these different agencies got together. Okay, there's a 50,000 pound whale on the beach. What are we going to do with it? It smells bad. It's terrible. Well, we're going to blow that shit up. So they stuffed the whale full of dynamite and they blew it up, and there was like a blast radius of whale bits.
Whale blubber crushed cars.
It was so bad. So being from Oregon, like anytime I see beached whale, I'm like, oh well, blow that up. Like,
just blow it up. Kinnahild, this is a video that there's a video of the news.
The news. You can find it.
I highly recommend that you watch this video, because
just Google, like YouTube, Google or YouTube, Oregon beached whale. I believe it was the Channel 2 news, and it is. Yeah. Oh my God! Because like the poor news reporter is kind of up on the road above the beach. And he's like, beach, the whale's behind him, and he's like, okay, they're gonna blow it up. Oh shit, they blew it up, and there's just whale bits everywhere.
That's not what we do up here.
But no, they don't do it anymore.
You are smarter than we are.
One of the things though about like, not the whale, but like the timber, I was trying to find the article, but it's been quite some time since I originally read it. But there was an article that I read. I wish I could remember what it was called or what it who wrote it. But somebody was talking about the presence, especially actually in Eric the Red Saga. There's a lot more of this, but the description of the timber specifically that is being taken from the new world, right? So you see, like, they go to Helluland and they're like, this land is not useful to us. But then when they go to Mark and Vinland, they're like, here we are.
Motherlode, right?
And if you remember how barren and treeless Iceland and Greenland are, this makes a lot of sense. You got to make your houses, you got to make your boats, you got to burn firewood in the winter.
Every ship that actually lands in the new world and comes back just laden with lumber and vegetation, grapes and fruits and nuts and all that, grains. They talk about the self-sowing grains, which I think is really cool.
So one of the questions we might have is like, because they don't actually really say in it. They just sort of assume it's obvious why they would be going to Vinland. Why do people want to go?
Right.
And like a big part of it is probably one of the major parts is
resources.
What resources can they get? And it's wood.
Absolutely.
Getting timber from Vinland. And by the way, like our idea of what these grapes are is kind of confusing because like the words that they use, they say they grow on like they are wine berries.
Yeah. That
grow on wineberry
trees.
They use the word tree, like not vine.
And it's clearly a very hardy thing because they gather this stuff and like in the fall, and then the next spring they sail back to Greenland, so they have overwintered these fruits. I don't know a grape that's gonna overwinter.
So I do want to really quickly note, so at this, I've got a bit on climate later, but the climate at this point, they're in a warm period.
Yes.
So the climate at L'Anse Meadow is warm enough that there were theoretically grapes growing. And when you think about a grapevine,
they're kind of
tree-like. Grapevine doesn't look like what you imagine. When most of us think vine, we think fine, thin tendrils.
Grapes grow.
They're not.
And wild grapes,
right?
like my predecessor in this house, the previous owner, I planted grapes, and they're dead now, and I've been pulling them out, and some of those are like the base, they're like tree trunks, right? Especially if you're from a place that doesn't have trees.
Well, and you're from a place that doesn't have grapevines,
right?
Like if you've got a word for vine and you've heard of a vine, you might not, but you've never like seen grapevines. You might not look at a grapevine and go, "That's a vine."
Because if you look at an ivy, which is a very viney, very common viney thing, an ivy vine is completely different from a grapevine. Like grapes are just hardy. Okay.
Yeah, basically, I'm not sold on was it grapes?
Yeah, the whole. There's tons of questions, linguistic and botanical questions
also
about like
it being
what
called,
the grapes are.
Right, and it being called Vinland, you can make wine out of any fruit. Like being out of grapes.
Vinland. Okay, so I do know a little bit more about like why wine and grapes and what has happened there. That is definitely like talking about the time period this is in. This is leading up. This is the very late 900s. We are talking about a time period in which, so if you remember, our big date that's the easiest Christianization date to remember is 1000 for Iceland. Iceland converts officially in 1000, but people had been getting converted, right? Like they had to lead up to that point. So this is a time where like it's every person you meet is different, and like it happens a lot in this story, and even more in Eric the Red's saga, where Christianity and paganism have tug of wars.
There's a lot of mishmash,
And one of the new things that you need to be a Christian is wine to take communion with, and that was never really a big part of things before. Just sure, they drank ale, but wine was not a big thing.
I had not thought about that.
We're talking about people who have just
converted. Or in the process of conversion,
and have realized like when they get to Vinland, they are surprised not just at how temperate it is and how much things grow, but also like, hey, the sun stays out longer. Like they talk about the time being different.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So they're much farther south than they're used to being. And
that's a really good point about the conversion and the wine. I hadn't thought about that. That is so after they blow up, or they don't blow up the whale, sorry, Oregon blows up the whale. After they eat the whale, and there was some conversation about eating the whale because some of the members of the party did not like the taste of whale. But they find natives, and they start trading, because who doesn't trade with natives? So the natives, I love this part. They really love the red fabric that the Norse had. And they trade skins, and there's a description of the Norse. So they've got this red fabric, and they're trading for it, and they start basically ripping the fabric into smaller and smaller chunks, and still getting the same amount of trade goods for these smaller bits. Like it starts out, it describes something about being, even for only a hand width of red fabric, you still get a full hide, which clearly the natives really loved this red fabric. And you're both looking for that reference. I totally see it.
Is this in Eric the Red's? So I don't remember.
Oh, you know what? That might be in Eric the Red.
I was going to say, because mine doesn't talk about it. Mine focuses on the milk.
The milk, the cheese and stuff.
The cheese. Oh, I totally forgot about the cheese. You're right. I'm getting the two. Yep. That's what happens when I read them together.
The moment that I had with that bit was, as somebody who is spectacularly lactose intolerant, presuming that these poor indigenous people have never encountered cow milk.
Oh, that's going to be unpleasant.
And they go crazy drinking this milk, and they carry it in their bellies. Like, those poor people.
Yeah, they trade and everything, and then they walked away with the goods in their stomachs. Yes. And I'm like, wait, okay, so they ate it all first?
Yes.
And now later they're gonna have to deal with the fact that they've
never had
cow's milk before?
Yes.
Oh no.
Yes, I had totally forgotten about that. Yeah, no, that's just gonna be unpleasant later.
I felt so bad.
I would give to hear the story from the other side of, like, we met these weird people.
That is what I want to find for all of this. I did a brief search, and I can't find anything, but there has to be native tales of this. I don't know, maybe not anymore. I would love to see the other side of this, right?
I think there's some extant stories from the Greenland Inuit. I think there's some oral traditions there, but I think the issue we run into with the Vinland settlement is that if it was the Beothuk unfortunately are culturally extinct.
Yes.
And then if it was the Dorset people, we don't really know, if I remember correctly, we don't really know who the inheritors of the Dorset are.
Right.
The Tula are the Proto-Inuit, so they're coming out of Western Alaska, pushing across the Baffin Islands, pushing across the Greenland, all this kind of stuff. So that we've got their stories surviving, but for the Dorset.
But it's so remote. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I would love to, and if anybody out there that's listening has information on the native side of these encounters, please send that our direction. All right, so they've traded. One of the things that they won't trade is Carl Stephanie won't let his men trade any weapons because he thinks that's a bad plan. Eventually, a bull that they brought along scares the natives away because they hadn't seen a bull, I would guess. I don't know. And they're big and scary, honestly.
I think this is... Again, Eric the Red's.
Did I screw that up again? Mm-hmm. Damn it. No, the bull is in both. The bull is in both,
but the bull scares them in Eric the Red's, I thought. And in this one, it's actually that they believe that a native person tried to take one of the weapons. And that's what causes the fighting. And Karlsefni later says that he wants the bull to lead the charge against them.
Yes. Yes, this is what happens when I do my notes the morning of.
This is literally why I read just Greenlendinga Saga this time, so that I would have only one stories.
I shall learn from my own mistakes.
It's so hard to keep them separated.
There is a really interesting linguistic moment, though, that we have just before the fighting starts, which is Gudrid is in her house and she's trying to communicate with one of the indigenous women who is described as, so she says, it says, Gudrid was sitting in the doorway beside the cradle of her son Snorri when a shadow fell across the door and a woman entered wearing a black, close-fitting tunic. She was rather short and had a band around her chestnut-colored hair. She was pale and had the largest eyes that have ever been seen in any human head. She walked up to Gudrid and said, "What is your name?" And Gudrid said, "My name is Gudrid. What is yours?" "My name is Gudrid," the woman replied. I would imagine that this woman probably didn't actually communicate in Old Norse. What is your name? Or maybe she did. Maybe there was enough interaction at this point that there was at least some sort of pidgin developing.
Yeah. Right.
But the woman sort of mimics back, "My name is
Gudrid." Yeah. Well, and and I could see that because there are several interactions and trading interactions. It's not just a one-time occurrence that they traded.
But the other weird thing is the description of the eyes, going back to the spooky stuff.
Right. So interestingly, when I I remember when I talked about these sagas in one of my classes, we did not see that woman as a native person.
Oh, really?
We took that as just another it's another supernatural event.
Okay.
I can't remember the name of the mimic isn't right, but like there's a term for a kind of mystical being that
I get I get what you're saying.
Does like that, and like I can't. Oh man, I wish I could just replay memories in my brain. Because we definitely talked about like this being a really weird section. Like
It really
is. If this was supposed to be a native woman, they probably would have clarified that. And like the description that they give is so weird. Like they said, like. To describe someone, so she was pale and had eyes so large that eyes of such size had never been seen in a human head. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's a weird section because it just doesn't sound.
It doesn't sound, and the descriptions are weird. It is, and I could see it being a more supernatural sort of thing. I don't know.
Like we're not getting any. Like. It's a weird. It's like it takes it into like a monstrousness that like you're not seeing them describing native people like that, like otherwise, like they're not using this. That to me seems more of a later colonization racialized kind of way of talking about other people, right? Like whereas for the most part throughout these texts they're just another people who are actually kicking their asses pretty
all
soundly.
Over the place.
But like, and so it's like really weird to have someone who's like creepily monstrous be described that way. So like, I think what we talked about, like this is actually sort of like more of a an omen, like a premonition of like bad shit's about to happen. Watch out, because like someone has just walked in who's like doesn't look quite right. And ask you what your name is, and then replies with your
own name. No, I would completely agree with you. It is a little funky.
And I can't remember, but I think that this also happens in Eric the Red Saga, and so I'd be interested to see what
that
looks like there.
That description is, all right, so back to our story. Yes. As you mentioned, Gudrid has a baby Snorri. Snorri is the first European born in the New World, after the continental shift and blah blah blah. So they clearly were settling. Like they were in there for the long haul. After another battle with the natives, one of the natives tries out one of the iron axes that like grabs an axe out of a dead person. Hits his companion with it, killing him, and the chief, the leader, throws the axe into the sea. Y'all can't have this. This is no good. The settlers overwinter. They go back to Greenland the next spring. Freydis and Thorvald lead another expedition, and again, she asks her brother for the house, and he says, no, you can borrow it, but you can't keep it. And then this next expedition ends in fighting, and Freydis kills all the women on the trip. What?
Can I give a quick like sort of what she does?
Yes.
So he is not explained, and we never get any explanation on why she does this, what her motivation is.
She just kills all the other women
She does. Okay. The motivation for the initial thing, the women thing, does like it ties in, but so essentially, I guess for wealth and fame. She figures out, my thoughts are that she figures out, hey, I've got an opportunity. If I take some people who I know, we can go out to where no one can see us. No one will know what we do out in Vinland because nobody's there. So I can do nefarious things and get away with
but
it.
also think of the word fame you get. I mean, she has now traveled to Vinland twice.
Right.
That's a lot of word fame. And then to be a survivor and come back after everyone else has died, and like that's a lot of word fame you get.
And with lots of timber and things, right? So she comes back with lots of goods.
Wealthy. She comes back
like
wealthy.
One of her major goals is, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to get a bunch of, essentially, I'm going to make a ton of bank, and then I'm going to come back.
Right.
And so to do that, she brings these two brothers.
Yes.
And she also goes with her husband, and these are the two groups: the brothers and the husband, whose name is Thorvald.
He's a Thorvald.
Thorvald. All right. Thorvald. And so then they get to Vinland, and things start going wrong because Freydis has said that they were all going to be camping together in Leif's houses. But when the two brothers show up and have already unloaded their stuff, she's like, what are you doing in my house?
Yeah, because they got there before she did, and she's like all pissy about it.
Leif said I could bar the houses, not you. And they're like, okay,
crazy woman.
Fine. So they go off and build their own houses a little ways away. Everything's kind of fine. Yep. They start doing fun and games, just sort of entertain themselves. Now that, like they're neighbors. There's neighbors in a very strange land, and but tensions keep going.
Tensions build because when you've got, so what are we talking? We're talking like, what, 40 people maybe between the two ships? I don't think it's even that many.
They each had 30 men.
Okay, so 60.
And then she sneaks an additional 5.
That's right. That's right. So we're talking 65, 70 people. Like, you're already pretty close in Greenland, and now you've got 70 people in Vinland. Like, I would get sick of those 70 people awfully damn quick.
And she, in this episode, right, she sort of personifies that cold council. Like we've talked about the cold council of women. Yeah. And she goes to Finnbogi, which is one of the brothers, and she's like, Finnbogi, can I switch ships with you, because your ship is larger and I'd like to leave now and I have all this stuff.
Yeah. Which Finnbogi must have been like, thank God, yes, take it, go.
Right.
And he talks about, like, I don't like this ill feeling that's, I like this country, but this, whatever's going on here is not,
I don't like this.
So when she's like, yeah, please, can we switch ships? Because I'd like to leave. He's probably like,
good riddance.
So then she goes back to her husband, and this is in the morning, so her husband hasn't even gotten up. So she leaves her husband's bed, goes to deal with Finnbogi, comes back to her husband's bed, and it's just like, so
he wakes up because her feet are cold and wet, which I love.
Okay, who has been camping in an event, gone to the biffy, or gone and like run an errand first thing in the morning and come back to bed, and your partner is like, what the hell, where have you been? Yeah, that's totally what that was.
So she comes, and in my translation it says, I went over to see the brothers to offer to buy their ship because I want a larger one. And so she's already lying, right? She offered to trade ships, and now she's telling her husband I offered to buy it. And this made them so angry that they struck me and handled me very roughly. Which they did not. No. And so, or at least like immediately preceding the story, right? Like
she's lying to her husband.
Right? You wretch. You would never avenge either my humiliation or your own, which, by extension of humiliating her, they have.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I realize now how far I am away from my home in Greenland. Unless you avenge this, I will divorce you. So she
just throws it down.
It's like
and like not even like she doesn't go like, hey, this just happened to me.
No.
And then wait to see. No.
Oh, no.
Under no uncertain terms, you have to act.
Throws the fuck down. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. And then when they go back, the survivors go back to Greenland, and Leif, her brother, just.
Well, they haven't died yet. Well,
yeah.
So she lies to her husband, and then and I love the next sentence is, not being able to ignore her upbraiding any longer. Yeah. Basically, they go out and they arm themselves, and they go in while the brothers are still asleep,
sleeping,
and tie them up and leave them outside. And the men are going to be like, cool, great, we've done it. We've tied them up. We've, this is
our job.
We're let's figure out what we're going to do. And Freydis, it has each of them who's brought outside killed.
Yeah.
And all of the men are now killed, and only the women are left, as no one would kill them.
Right.
The men who had just gone out and done this, it's not.
Yeah, the men are not going to kill the women.
It would be a cowardly thing. You would lose renown for doing so.
Yep.
And Freydis then spoke, "Hand me an axe." This was done, and then she attacked the 5 women there and killed them all.
Yep.
And this is when they go back, and she tells everyone who's survived. She takes all of their stuff and all of everything, and goes back and tells everyone who survived, like, don't you dare breathe a word of this to anyone. I can make your life living hell. You know I can. And
it's true.
But as you were saying, Ula, they go back and
they go back and Leif finds out about it, and he is unhappy with all of this situation.
Really quick, going back to the murders, it was very interesting to me that this wasn't a hall burning. Like this feels like it should be a hall burning, right? Early in the morning, catching your enemy unawares, right? Like this feels like it's building up to hall burning, and they don't.
Nope.
They don't, because I think it's because of the resources.
Resources.
Right?
Why burn the hall when you can just kill them with an axe?
But that then raises a really interesting question about the women, because frankly, and not to be a little crude about it, but women are resources.
It's true.
Right? Like in this period, women, you need, if you're going to be settling a territory, you need women. Because women are going to produce the babies, and Snorri can't do it by himself, right? Like he can't.
That's why they make a very clear note of exactly how many women and how many men they bring on.
Yes.
Right. So by killing, like, she's willing to keep the resources of the house and not leave this hall burning, but then she turns around and kills the women. And it's an interesting balance between what resources she wants to preserve, so clearly Freydis is not out there to colonize Vinland, right? Like, because she destroys what you would need for a colony, which is the women, but she keeps the physical, like when we think about the history of colonization, right? It's resource extraction. Yeah. So she keeps the resources.
She keeps it, and it keeps the physical, property. She keeps the money,
wealth, right?
She keeps
she takes the wealth. She leaves she destroys the resources that you would need to propagate a culture in a new space, and then she hies her happy self back to Greenland.
Right. And I love that so this tale ends with Karlsnemi and Gudrid sitting down in Norway with their son Snorri. He was about 3 when they come back. So they spent several years in Vinland. They come back to Norway to settle down. She eventually goes on a pilgrimage to Rome, comes home, builds a church, becomes a nun, and it is a point of pride that 3 bishops are counted among her descendants. So again, this ties into the Christianity, the conversion to Christianity. And as Bercy, we were chatting about this before we came online, she is quite possibly the most traveled woman of Norse time. She went to Vinland, she went to Rome. That's a lot of traveling in 1000 AD. Like that's a lot of movement there.
And she fulfills the prophecy, right?
And she fulfills the prophecy. Oh yeah, right. The prophecy that her first, maybe second husband. I think it's
second. I think he was the second husband.
Yeah. I think it was the second husband. The second husband prophesized, you're going to marry again. Everything's going to be great. Your sons are going to be great men. I think even great men of God. But
So what it says, at least in this translation, is your progeny will be great and vigorous, bright and excellent, sweet and fragrant. You and your husband, blah blah blah. And so what I thought was really interesting is, thinking back to those supernatural episodes that we talked about, right? The bad smell of an evil creature, an evil thing, right? But then with Christianity, you have the uncorruptible corpses.
Well, and the incense and the censer and the myrrh, and if you think about that as being the sweet scent, that yeah, makes sense. I like it.
Good stuff smells good, bad stuff smells bad.
Right.
It's totally true.
All
right, so now we have come to the end of our tale, which is this saga spans what, all in like a couple 5-6 years maybe, if you count the winters. I think we're talking a span of about 6 years, maybe a little bit, maybe 7 from if you count the first part of Bjarni getting lost.
I think there might be spots in between too.
Yeah, like this tale covers a pretty significant chunk of time. Mm-hmm. We've got 3-ish 4 expeditions, are getting lost off course. Mm-hmm. There's just a lot going on here.
Can I make a quick note about getting lost?
No, not at all.
No, none. So, this I did actually manage to find, but not a copy that I could access without paying. An article I read that was written in 1955, so it's been around for a while. This is not that new information, but oftentimes people ask me questions when they find out that I studied Vikings, and they go, "Oh my God, tell me about this and that," and then, and sometimes people are like, "I've heard about these sunstones and all these like cool Viking like navigation devices. How did the Vikings do it? They knew the stars. They could use these stones to look at the like quartz that's kind of clearish, so that you could look through it and see where the sun was even when it was cloudy, and like all these different like things for like how they might have like navigated so well. I mean, they were incredible explorers, right? Like they went all the way down to the Black Sea on, sometimes, having to do portages around cataracts, and they went all through the Mediterranean, all the way to Vinland. These must have been incredible mariners who never lost their way. So how did they navigate so well? They didn't. They did not navigate well at all whatsoever.
No, they blundered into the New World. They got lost multiple times.
If you've got a culture that has an entire word, Hafvilla, which is Hafvilla, Haf means ocean or sea, and Villa, I guess, well, it's to be lost at sea. You've got a whole word that just means the being lost at sea. It happened all the time. There's so many different sagas, like almost any saga you read that involves sailing, like you will find moments where we got blown off course for 3 weeks. We got blown off course. We beached, there was a storm, and when we woke up, we were on an island that we did not recognize, and there was a dragon there. Like, it's constant. They are losing their way all the time.
All the time.
How did they navigate when it was stormy and foggy? They didn't. They hoped they were going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember, at least in Iceland, like in the North Atlantic, there's some very strong currents. Mm-hmm. And the currents circulate a specific way. And so obviously later on, this will be very important for the triangle trade, because that's following a different set of currents. But around Iceland, Greenland, and Norway, you have the Imminger current, which leads you from Western Iceland to Greenland. So it sort of follows this curve. And then there's another current, the West Greenland current, that takes you up West Greenland, picks up the Canadian current, which brings you down. Baffin Islands, and it picks up the Labrador current, which points you right at L'Anse Meadow. Yeah. Right. So if you didn't really try too hard,
you don't have to try hard. You're just gonna end up. You could be on a little skiff, a little, think a Mark Twain raft. You're gonna end up in L'Anse Meadows.
Like, I mean, you could try. Like, there's ways to screw this up, and largely those involve sinking, which happened infrequently. Yeah. But these currents across the North Atlantic are very regular and very predictable. And as I mentioned previously, we're at a warm period, so you've got low sea ice. Low sea ice is very important because that means it's more navigable. The low sea ice was also possibly part of the reason the Dorset culture was retracting, because they were very reliant on sea ice for hunting.
And fishing,
So anyway, so you've got low sea ice, you've got these strong currents. It was not hard to get from Iceland.
You kind of just landed in the new world. If you weren't paying attention to where you were going, there's several descriptions in sagas of like people just kind of sailed about and they would see land and be like, hey, there's land over there.
It's sort of the most optimistic version of fuck around and find out.
Yeah.
Literally. That's basically what they're doing in the North Atlantic. They're like,
and also like I really recommend. Actually, I looked up the ocean currents just now just to sort of see what you were talking about too. But like if you just look up the ocean currents and get some great maps that are focused just on that area, I want people to like get the Mercator map out of their head.
The Mercator map is
look
bullshit.
At the Arctic area and see how close Iceland and Greenland are to each other. When we look at the map spread out all nice and long and north and south, you're like, well, Iceland's all the way over here by Europe, and Greenland is all the way over here. Yeah, Greenland's all the way over here by the Americas.
The Mercator map is a white. It's a lie. It is a lie. The Mercator map is a white colonization tool. I have so many opinions on that. And they might have halfway been formed by episodes of The West Wing, but won't go into that right now.
I will say, in case of everything, who was it? Statistician George Box once said, all models are false and some models are useful. Once again, maps are just models. All models are false. They're lying to you, but sometimes they're useful.
The best thing about statistics is that you can make it say whatever you want. That's same with a map. Like maps are lies. Don't ever listen to maps.
Really quickly, since we're on statistics, before we wrap this up, because we're coming up on an hour, but I suffered through this, guys, so you're going to suffer with me. I found this really neat. So there is a point in the story.
Is this your cosine thing?
It is. It is. Oh. A map. So in the story, right, in chapter 3, in my translation, it says, in this country, night and day were of more even length than in either Greenland or Iceland. On the shortest day of the year, the sun was already up by 9 a.m. and did not set until after 3 p.m. And so the terms that they use in this story, 9 a.m. is dagmal time. So that's like daymeal time. And then the second word I have not got highlighted in here. Hang on.
Also, I have a slightly different note in my book that I'd love to read in a second. Oh yeah, I've got that right here. So those two words are Eiktarstaður, and the other one is Dagmolastaður. And my note here, it's a little bit shorter than yours, but it just is about the speculation. It just says, this sentence has been the subject of no small amount of speculation, for instance, by equating Eikarstaður with the point of nones and Dagmalastaður as the point of late morning in an attempt to fix a location for Vinland, which has been to little real avail, as the meaning of these obsolete terms of reference is impossible to interpret with any certainty. Interesting discussions on this and many other aspects of the Vinland voyages are raised by Gwyn Jones, and it's just there's just a little bit of biography after that.
So one of these debates about the location, they didn't really get too much into the location, but this article is called The Visibility of a Midwinter Sun in the First Viking Settlement in America. Calculations compared with the Icelandic sagas. It's by a gentleman named Martin Ekman, and it was published as part of the Small Publications in Historical Geophysics, coming out of the Summer Institute for Historical Geophysics in the Åland Islands.
Oh, so I'm super on board for this thing.
Right,
that
like,
is
holy
incredible.
Cow! Nerd alert! Nerd alert!
Right? And so you're going through, and they're talking about, the settlement of Iceland, and you've got this really nice, simple map of sort of Canada. And then there's a bit of the Gragas laws that says it is iked when the sun has passed 2/3 of the southwestern octant and has 1/3 left. So at this point, the author of the article abandons language altogether and starts in, this means Ikestather would correspond to an astronomical azimuth of A equals 45 degrees divided by 2 plus 2 times 45 degrees divided by 3. So the azimuth is equal to 52.5 degrees. That's illustrated by figure 2.
Okay,
show us the sign. Show us the map.
So last night, I'm kind of hanging out on between two piers, and I'm listening to Helga and Tulia and Anne, and I'm having a great time. And up in my chat pops Kinheld with just a picture of like this mathematical equation. I'm like, who the hell brought math into my literature? That is not acceptable. I will take words in math before I take math in words.
The height h of the sun above the horizon can be computed by applying spherical trigonometry to the fundamental astronomical triangle. And here's where things get really fun, because my dad actually used to teach spherical geometry and spherical trigonometry.
Oh, Jesus.
So at this point, I tag in beloved father, who has been hauled around Iceland, and he's just like, I have books. What
I love you. I love you. I love you.
And I'm just like, I don't actually need books. Like, I think I get
I have got to meet your father next time I'm up in Alaska. Oh my God, he is a patient man.
Beloved father, I love both my parents very much, but dad has been hauled around on a lot of these adventures with me. And so you have to understand, this man is roughly 6'4". He has a large white beard, and he's just real chill. There's a lot of chill there. He grew up in LA, came to Alaska on adventures, right? Just a lot of chill, but a very deep thinker. And then sometimes he's just like, my children, I do not understand. So he just gets hauled around by his daughters to do all these, and he's just like, okay.
That sounds very familiar, since I used to drag my dad out to SCA events when I started when I was 14.
So, God, I love you guys.
Anyway, so here is where I start to lose track of things. Here, and I don't actually know which symbol this is, but it's like a phi. We'll call it phi. Here, phi is the latitude of the place. A is the azimuth of the sun, and delta is the declination of the sun. In our case, we want to study the sun at the shortest day of the year. Hence, h must be a small quantity, allowing us to safely put cosine h equals 1. This makes it possible to solve 1 for h. Through sine h equals sine delta plus cosine phi times cosine alpha divided by sine phi, and just like goes on and on and on, right? And the point of it is, the whole point of this was determining how much light they get at midwinter. And this is important to me as an Alaskan, because solstice, like, light changes very drastically up here in
absolutely.
Alaska. Right? So I'm not even in like where it gets real tricky, right? Like Fairbanks, they're down to just a few hours of daylight in the winter.
Yeah.
We at least get as many as 5.5, which is, we treasure. Like, we are real pleased with this. So I went.
Speaking as my first trip to Alaska was in January. Yeah, I get ya.
Yeah. So December 22nd is like, there's a whole mood around here where you're like, the sun came back. The sun is back.
The sun is back.
Sacrifice worked. We're good.
Yeah. My first trip up there, I arrived on December 20. It was a couple days after. It was at like the 26th or 27th or whatever, and I was there through like I was there, I don't know, a week, 10 days or whatever. Oh yeah, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm just gonna sleep all the time, because I was in Kenai, so Anchorage adjacent. Yeah, I can't imagine being in Fairbanks or
how fast it changes too. Like when I got to Sweden last semester in mid to late January, the sun was going down at 3:30 p.m. But by the time I left in March of this year for just minor reasons,
global pandemic, whatever.
Yeah, always remember that it was Friday the 13th when I came back. But the sun was going down finally at like, I think it was like 6 at that point. I was so excited.
Look at how much light there is.
I was going to be able to have dinner in the daylight.
It feels so good. Like the day that you go to work and come home from work in
the daylight,
just like this is the greatest thing ever. So Anchorage at midwinter, Anchorage gets 5 hours and 27 minutes of sunlight. Which is more than the two of the other places we'll talk about. But it feels like there's none, because you get up, it's dark when you go to work, you're at work in the dark for a bit, and then the sun comes up, and then you're like, hurrah, but you don't really get to spend time in the sun because you're in the office. So then the sun goes down and you leave, and it is real depressing. So Eiríksstaðir gets, at midwinter, Eiríksstaðir in Iceland gets 4 hours of sunlight. Greenland, the Western Greenland settlement, for this I used Nuuk, which is the modern Greenlandic name for it, gets 4 hours and 6 minutes. So that would have been really indistinguishable, right? From Eiríksstaðir to the Western settlement in Greenland, it would have felt the same. And then Landsmeadow, at midwinter, they get 7 hours and 48 minutes. And I can tell you, somebody who's experienced 5 hours and 27 minutes, when you get to that 7 hour mark, you're like, this is a party. And
two plus hours of extra sunlight. That's
like,
huge.
It would have felt so different. And just like this is spring. And it's warmer, you've got more daylight. It would have felt so good to these people. And then at midsummer, of course, we get 19 hours and 21 minutes. Greenland and Iceland get about 21 hours plus minutes. And then Landsmeadow only gets 16 hours and 39 minutes. But you don't need the sunlight in the summer that you like, because you didn't go through that deep midwinter.
Right. It's not as well. And if you think about it from an agricultural, gathering and harvesting, they weren't sowing crops because they had self-sowing grains, as is described. There's a huge difference between having, needing the 20 plus hours worth of daylight you can get by with only 16 hours if you have a much more fertile land, right? You don't have to do as much gathering if there's more to gather in a closer area. Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm going to be thinking about this week is how these people are getting vitamin D. Because I can tell you, Alaska gets a little nutty in March, February, that area, because we're all vitamin D deficient. A lot. And that's not great for your brain, which led me on this whole interesting thought, sort of rabbit hole about like the effects of lack of vitamin D, lack of vitamin B, on the brain in winter, and you go through this period of sort of mental confusion, and you get real crotchety. Cabin fever is a thing, and I can tell you, as somebody, like, they were getting more sun because they were probably outdoors more in the summer, but the sun doesn't get to the level it needs to in the Arctic for you to get that. It doesn't reach the right
horizon.
Like, to get that natural vitamin D from the sun, so you need to get it from your food sources. And if they're importing a food source from southern Scandinavia, that's not going to have the same dietary supplements that you would have needed to develop, like the indigenous populations of the Arctic, the Thule, the Dorset. These folks have developed a diet that's going to support them. They're coming from a much more subarctic region to an Arctic region. If they didn't make the necessary changes in diet to augment their vitamin D. Now they're getting milk, right? Like, this is a dairy culture, so they've got milk.
They do, and they brought their livestock with them.
Stuff
so
like that.
They are getting their dairy, but they've got that whole whale thing going on. But
it's long-term vitamin D deficiency can really
it'll mess you up.
Special snowflake.
Yeah, it'll mess you up, and So do you wonder if Freydis killing all of the women had something to do with a vitamin D deficiency? I don't know.
Or getting stuck in the cabin with her husband all winter. I don't know.
What? Also a possibility.
Anyway, we're now 15 minutes over. I've talked through all of the things that I was really
we covered all of the things that we want to cover. This has been a fantastic show. I just love you nerds. I love you nerding out with me. So does anybody else have anything else on the Greenland saga? Are we good to wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
We might have to reschedule a little. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bercy.
Oh, no, I was just asking what next week was, but you're talking about scheduling too, so go for it.
Next week is Eric the Red saga, but do we need to shuffle the time?
We might need to, because Bercy and I are both teaching at the Raid Delayed Collegium.
Oh, yeah, right.
So,
could we maybe just push it back a week so that I could focus on the Raid Delayed Collegium, perhaps, maybe? I can also, it's also fine if I don't, because all I'm going to do is just read the saga and then talk. Like, this is not that much preparation comparatively.
So I'm happy to either push it back a week, which would put it at the beginning of my birthday week, so we could kick off Claire's birthday week festivities with talking about sagas, which
is normal.
Right.
Or we could push to like Monday or something, and just shoot it Monday night.
No,
we've talked about this.
Weeknights are rough for me.
Sorry.
We'll take this offline. We'll take this off. We don't need to discuss this with our 4 fans that are still watching. So the next episode, when that happens, currently scheduled for next Saturday, but we might adjust, will be Eric the Red Saga, which also discusses Vinland. My goal was to spend all of November on the New World in Vinland, but there's only 2 sagas and there's like 4 weekends, so we'll figure that out timey-wimey. And then December we're going to be talking about Yuletide, and I'm sure we'll delve deeply into the conversion to Christianity and all of the things that go along with that. So for the last 2 people that are still watching us, thank you very much. We love you, and until next time, we're Saga Saturday. Any last words?
I got nothing.
All right.